Welcome to Coffee with the Risk Manager, where we share a cup of coffee with colleagues and discuss all things risk management and higher education. Today's episode, we're filming in a very special location. We're at IRMIA's annual conference here in Baltimore. And I'm pleased to have a friend and colleague with me, Nakeschi Watkins, Director of Risk Management and Insurance for Cornell University. And we're going to be talking construction today, which I think is on the minds of a lot of risk managers. So Nakeschi, do us a favor and introduce yourself.
So hi, everyone. I am Nakeschi Watkins, the Director of Risk Management and Insurance at Cornell University.
So I have to say, a year ago or so, I had the pleasure of visiting Cornell and walking the campus with you and visiting a couple of your active construction sites. And the invitation to participate today really came out of my experience from that, because honestly, I was flabbergasted by how well your construction team knew you. And when Nakeschi walked on site, it was the risk manager is here. They knew exactly who you were. They knew what we were doing. It was a surprise visit. And it was clear that the reputation you have on campus as a risk manager is fully integrated into your construction process. How did that happen? Tell us a little bit about the culture and what that looks like for you.
So I have to be honest. So I would say a lot of the groundwork was already laid prior to me getting there. My predecessor did a lot of work, and I just tried to continue that. I don't try to force. It's about building relationships. Our culture, we believe in, safety first. We believe in, I would say when projects are going on, people are being safe. Everybody on these construction sites, they have appropriate PPE on. And that even goes for me as a risk manager. If I am coming on the site, closed-toe shoes, hard hat, safety glasses, vests, all those appropriate activities. So I would say, work myself, my environmental health and safety department, my facilities team. And I would say it takes all of us to collaborate together to make that happen.
So when we were walking on campus, it was clearly active construction at that point, and you had high visibility, recognizable figure on campus. They knew what your role was. They knew how they had to respond when you came on campus. It's not because you walked on an active construction site and they just understood it. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about how risk integrates through the entire construction phase, from capital planning all the way to kind of the completion of a project.
Yeah. And again, I go back to collaboration, great partnerships that were established prior even to me getting there. And I think me continuing to educate, whether it's the facilities project team, whether it's the contracts manager, whether it's my boss, the VP of finance, but I would say taking that approach, understanding that, even when the facilities project team starts to look at projects, where is it going to happen on campus? What are the types of insurances? So we try to be transparent. I am of the belief that regardless of what a decision is or who makes a decision, everybody needs to have all the risks, the pros and cons that go with it. So if we're building a building, understanding that appropriate insurance is in place, whether that's builder's risk, making sure the contractor has appropriate contracts for its GCs, its subs, the additional people that are working on that project. So again, it goes back to teamwork. I won't selfishly take credit for everything. And I don't, I try to do it. The one thing I will say is I ask questions.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to take no, or someone to try to tell me you can't get into my business. So I take a nice approach and just start to ask questions.
So the insurance piece.
Mm-hmm.
So So first of all, I hear a lot from your colleagues, your peers in higher ed, that this seems to be a sticking point for kind of campus partnerships and integration on campus. What we traditionally, and I won't say traditionally, what we've seen is that facilities management or a project manager will own the construction project from the capital planning process all the way through. The risk manager may or may not know that that's happening. I've heard stories of people finding out on social media that a construction site is ongoing, or that they just drive by campus and see the groundbreaking ceremony. And that's a reality that we're faced with. So it's funny you talk about the insurance. So tell us a little bit about the value and what you've kind of been able to accomplish with the insurance piece.
So, I think number one, when we think about a project or whatever happened, it affects the university period. And I think from the legal landscape. So, when a project is built, it's not just, I think people have the perception that is all the GC, and that's not the case, because the university still has some oversight. The university still has to make sure that the GC is following processes, guidelines, and things like that. The other thing is that because insurance is involved, I take an active approach. So new construction, renovation, I'm placing the builder's risk for those type of projects. I think for one, because there are various terms and conditions out there, and sometimes our project managers don't really understand that and understand why that coverage is in place, because it could have an impact on the other insurances. Ensuring that a GC, the contractors, the sub, have appropriate contracts and insurance in place, making sure that the limits they have are adequate for our projects. One of the things that, I've seen, I've been doing this for about 17 years. And one of the things we see all the time is that, a lot of GCs will buy one insurance policy for multiple projects that they could be working on. What people need to understand is that that has an impact on your general liability. If their limits are eroded, that falls back on the university. So I think for me, it's important to, whether it's the VP of finance, whether it's the VP of facilities, to let all the stakeholders know up front and being transparent of, what could happen if a GC doesn't have appropriate insurance, if there's a major project delay, how that impacts the builder's risk, hard costs, soft costs, all those things that you take into consideration. What I'm seeing now is that construction costs are still on the rise. CLT, huge conversation right now, expensive. Most carriers, you work with, they don't want to put up the entire capacity for a builder's risk project. So, they're sharing. So it's very important when you're looking at these projects, evaluating, getting your risk manager involved, understanding the insurance policy. I would like to say convincing the project managers to embrace. Making senior leadership aware and just putting it out there so that everybody is aware of the risk. And if we're going to make a decision, we need to have all the informed facts.
Yeah. And it's, again, to the the limits, the adequate limits, right? So in my experience and what I've seen in the field is that when a risk manager is not part of the process, and when someone from facilities or project management owns it, they often passively accept the terms and conditions and the contracts that are offered to them for part of the project. And what will happen is a contractor will come in and say, yes, we have a $200 million builder's risk limit, but that's a shared limit for all of their projects. Yeah. So that $200 million isn't, to your point, that can be eroded based on a loss at another project. So for a risk manager to insert themselves that early into the process, you can do a couple things to add value, right? And people will pay attention to you.
Right.
You can have dedicated limits.
Right.
You can have the terms and conditions that you want, which I think is what you were alluding to.
Yes.
And then the other piece is there's a markup on that GC premium cost that they are passing through that contract.
Yes.
So risk managers who are able to take control of the builder's risk and the construction insurance program is also able to show immediate financial value more times than not. Yeah. So I like that. I really like that point. But again, it's hard to get a seat at the table. It's hard to be able to show that value, to convince people, to your earlier point, that value is there. So what words of wisdom do you have for your peers that are trying to create a culture similar to Cornell where the risk manager is recognized and respected?
So I gotta give a shout out to my boss, the VP of Finance, because this is one thing that I would say, again, he is involved in the conversation. If questions come up, he's get the risk manager involved. The second thing too is, having counsel at the table. Risk management and counsel works very close together, in understanding the legal language, the insurance. One thing I meant to allude to earlier was the labor law in New York. I think there are misconceptions to what that is and how it impacts construction. And we don't see, and at least I don't see where that has changed. So it's important that I would say your VP of Finance, if you're reporting to general counsel, getting those people involved in the conversation. And again, I don't want to say be forceful, but having those conversations with facility, asking questions. I know sometimes probably it gets the perception that, I'm just this hard risk manager, but, we talk about resiliency. We talk about, making stakeholders aware, senior leadership. I just like to have, if people are going to make a decision at the senior leadership level, they need to be informed. They need to be educated. Pros, cons, whatever the outcome it may be, they need to understand the decisions that they make. And again, I would say, start building those partnerships. I try to take the approach of is that I want to be a partner. I'm a collaborator. I'm always, it's very important to set the tone to reach out and collaborate, whether it's EHS, whether it's those various stakeholders in the facilities department, whether it's my fire marshal, but just making sure I am partnering and collaborating with folks. And I think at the end of the day, giving senior leadership the answers they need to know to make an informed risk decision.
It's interesting because to your point, we just recorded a Coffee with the Risk Manager episode with Heather Taylor from Grand Valley State. And we talk about this exact thing about building partnerships and creating that risk-aware culture on campus. So certainly glad to have another risk manager who believes in that on our show. I will say too, another theme that we've brought out of this is articulating the value and the language of the audience. So if you are trying to insert yourself into a process, be upfront about the value that you bring. Where is it that your facilities are going to see improvement? You are not a burden by being part of the process. You're helping, you're not harming, right? So I think it's flipping that script a little bit too, and figuring out how we can have positive interactions around risk management rather than the office of no and oh.
Exactly. We're not here to say no.
We're here to know KNOW. Thank you, Gary Langsdale from Penn State. So thank you, Nakeschi. I look forward to the rest of the conference with you, and thank you for sharing your insights on construction.
Thank you, Stacie.
Cheers.
Cheers.